Welcome to the Epic Success Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Shannon Irvine. We're continuing in this series of up-leveling from the inside out, training your brain to transform your business. You know that's what we're about here at the Epic Success Podcast. But now I'm getting to put on my scientific geeky side and really show you how optimization and really leaning into all the systems of the body, the brain, and the mind-body connection is the thing that you're missing. It's not the next strategy or the next tool, or the next tactic. It's optimizing what God gave you to begin with to actually be able to click into your biggest and best version of yourself. And so for those of you who've been in the series, you heard from Doc Jen Fit last week, and she was talking about mobility, and she actually kind of started the conversation around breath work a little bit because she's leaning in hard into that. And so I asked Jen, who was her go-to person where it came to everything breath work, and we're going to talk about what that means in a minute. And she introduced me to the one and only Brian MacKenzie, who I have been following already. So that was really, really cool. Small world, right? So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Shannon Irvine.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I'm a big fan of Jen's. She does incredible work, and I am very appreciative that you are already following me. And I'm sure we can have plenty to share as I am now following you.
Oh, awesome. Well, I do know you work with a lot of high performers, lots of athletes, lots of different people. My high performing crowd are all entrepreneurs, all people who are really trying to level up in their life.
Perfect.
And their business.
I work with that.
Yeah, I know you do. And so one of the things, and of course, right now, we can't deny we're all in the middle of probably one of the most stressful events in world history, in my opinion. I've never seen a lockdown like what COVID is creating for this such a time as this. And we're all dealing with the stress differently. And my tribe is used to me talking about limiting beliefs and how stress affects the body and how it affects the brain and how the brain will shut down and the neurochemicals fire and they don't allow you to be in the state of focus and giving and high performance. One of the things I love about what you do in breath work is because it is a God-given right you have to breathe. And once you learn how to do it in a way, it really optimizes things. So I would love for you to break down what the heck is breath work, why is it important, and what does it have to do with optimization at all?
Sure. Breath work at large alludes to breath control. So there is an influx of an infinite array of methodologies and ideas around that. The oldest practice we know of that involves this is probably yoga. Yoga actually is not what it was. And most of us actually do have a yoga practice. It's just the idea of what that is. And so when, I literally had this conversation this morning training with my girlfriend and her brother, who we were talking about yoga, and it's like, oh, I want to be able to be like a yogi and go upside down and do that. I'm like, well, you actually have a yoga practice. She's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, well, we use breath control in training, and yoga is more or less about breath control. And so if I have a movement practice, regardless of what that is, if I'm learning from that and it involves a breath practice, more or less you have a yoga practice. But things that we were able to pull from, but most people are polarized by this. They're either way into it or they're way away from it.
Yeah.
And so we've done a pretty decent job and are still continuing to work at making that esoteric language digestible for the rest of the world. So like a word like pranayama means breath or energy control. So that's in Sanskrit, breath and energy are the same thing, and for good reason. And this is back to your question. Well, what's this breath work thing? And so breath is energy. That is simply what it is. And that is the only means we really have for long-term use of energy. And so a few billion years ago, a dance was done where cells decided to communicate to use the available oxygen that was now present in the environment for its use of moving energy. We think of energy or behave as though energy is this thing we create. There is no energy that is created. That's a misnomer. Energy is moved, it is transferred, and it's been moving and transferring since the beginning of time. It's just expanded where it's gone. And so in a human condition, we're still moving energy, but we're using oxygen to do that. And so to do that, we inhale the air, which is 21% oxygen. And then we exhale most of what that oxygen was, but carbon dioxide comes out. And that carbon dioxide is actually the mechanism for why we all breathe. Because carbon dioxide is an acid, but it comes out through the lungs. And that mechanism, which existed a few billion years ago as well, was when the earth transferred. And so single cell organisms largely learned how to function in that environment, right? Stressed environment, anaerobic environment. So you have your anaerobic stressor, and then you have your aerobic lower stress or ability to, understand or be more parasympathetic. If I start to move into that autonomic nervous system side of things, right? So our sympathetic place is more of our anaerobic, doesn't have to be, but our parasympathetic is more of our aerobic. Like you can only respond well and make good decisions in a parasympathetic place. If we're in a high stress response, like we are as a population right now, globally, we are largely reacting to things. So panic is a very easy thing to happen, right? And so this is where breath control comes in, and controlling of CO2 allows us to actually utilize the oxygen, because the misnomer is that, oh, I need more air. That hyperventilation is actually not giving you any more oxygen than you were getting before. It's now I'm dumping carbon dioxide, which is limiting how I have biologically available oxygen inside the blood.
Wow.
Because carbon dioxide is what kicks the oxygen molecules off the red blood cells for use. And that is the simplest way we can kind of talk about it in terms of, hey, how does it how does it work, and why is breath control important? Why would a yogi exhale into downward dog and inhale into upward dog? So extension. Right. And for good reason. They follow this flow to control the breathing. If I move faster than I can control the breathing, I'm no longer in control of the energy. I lose the energy. I become more anaerobic, right?
Wow, yeah.
That's the simplicity of it, right? But if I control it, the only variable I'm controlling is that CO2. Unless the work demand requires more oxygen, which rarely do we get to. And so what happens is that when that switch happens, when I switch from my aerobic, and what we found is that when we look back historically, we look back on a lot of the work being done by a lot in the orthodontist and dentist community right now, facial structures, jaws. We have a devolved jaw. So we have not evolved our jaw. And so that's why many of us, including myself, had braces as a kid. Is what they did was they pulled my wisdom teeth, and then they fit my teeth into the spaces that were provided, versus a wider jaw prior to the advent of very broken down food prior to ingesting it and requiring the jaw that came forward more. And so the teeth naturally fit in place. And we actually see that there were perfect teeth without brushing, without flossing, all of this stuff, right? And as crazy as that might sound, the fact is that fits into breathing, because the maxilla, which is the bone structure below the eyes and comes down to the upper part of the upper teeth, right, was wider, and the sinus cavities were wider, and our noses were able to pull in more air, and we actually were breathing a lot better back then because we were provided. But because of that jaw shrinking, the face shrinks, so now we become more mouth breathers. That inevitably ends up dumping more of the carbon dioxide, not the oxygen. The oxygen's like, and so the easiest way to understand this is best free divers in the world can hold their breath around 10 minutes. That means that they are using all of the oxygen in their system. And so the oxygen gets critically low. All of us listening and participating right now, if we were to hold our breaths, there might be a few people who can hit that 3, 4, maybe 5 minute mark. I've hit 5 minutes with training. Okay.
Lots of training.
But we're all going to think that we're running out of oxygen, holding our breath at 2, 3, 4 minutes, right?
Yeah.
No, That is not true. What's happening is the carbon dioxide has built to a place to where our brain stem, namely, is going, yo, breathe, we need air. Yeah. And so that trigger is to breathe more, right? Or breathe sooner. And that is where that comes into play, because our brain stem has centers in it set up is where our respiration centers are set up. And that picks up chemoreceptors that are set up in the aortic heart and carotid neck arteries. Wow. Those arteries go towards things, veins go away.
Right.
That tells a story. That means we're on a prediction system. So when the panic sets in or the overthinking goes on, that monkey brain goes haywire.
Yeah.
You get a reaction through that brain stem in a predictive sense of like, oh, CO2 is rising, so now I need to breathe more. Now I'm going on. Now my physiology just responds to this, right?
Right.
Versus if I just slow the breathing down, I now control the carbon dioxide. There's a reason why we were given bags to breathe in when we're panicking.
Right.
Well, what is that? I'm regurgitating the carbon dioxide. I'm forcing myself to so carbon dioxide is a vasodilator. We dilate the vasculature as a result of that.
Wow.
So now I'm opening things up versus constricting them when I hyperventilate. Right? There's this whole compounding effect that starts to happen, and we behave and think as though sometimes it's about oxygen. And although it is at the heart, because that's how we move energy and how we stay calm, the only way at the heart we can do that efficiently is to look at somebody like a lifelong yogi who's controlled breathing, or a free diver who can hold their breath for so long that they actually tap into the oxygen reserves. Because the hemoglobin molecule, which is invested in the red blood cell, it prefers the carbon dioxide prefers to be on that molecule over oxygen. So that's what knocks the oxygen molecule off, right?
Okay.
And so that's part of a process that if I don't have adequate amounts of carbon dioxide, I tend to overbreathe. And if I'm not using oxygen to my fullest or most efficient, even just throughout my day, then we can see that there are problems in every single piece of research we've looked at that looks at respiration rate with disease. You will see a double, if not triple, the amount of a respiration rate or volume of air that is moved in that patient.
Wow.
And that tells us there's a stress response going on, right? That doesn't mean that breathing becomes the cure-all, but how many diseases, how many things are dependent on oxygen? Like how would that help that disease? How would that benefit that disease, right?
Right.
There isn't a doctor out there that wouldn't be like, yeah, that's why we have you on oxygen concentrators when you're in the hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah. No kidding. So now you're getting 90% oxygen into the system.
Yeah.
Right.
Just turning over dead cells.
So that you're actually and versus like, hey, no, we've actually got a CO2 problem here. Like the CO2, the inflammation is kicking, all of this stuff is interconnected. And so when we learn to play with breath control, regardless of the practice, we start to understand how to manage our stress levels, because there's an intricate first response to our breath and what's happening, no matter if it's physical or mental stress.
I love it. And so many entrepreneurs that I know, they click into what I call the sympathetic stress. So they click into the hustle, to the willpower, to the push, to everything that's sympathetic, right? And where focus, where grounding, where ideas and creativity and all that comes from is in the parasympathetic, and it's in the relax, in the digestion, in the grounding, in that space. So I would love for you to break down, like, that was a beautiful explanation of like what's going on and why it's triggered. So I'm curious, now that they know that, what can they do to start to move from that state of intensity or monkey brain, or just that hamster wheel, really, of what they perceive they have to do, and they're in this constant go, adding coffee and then adding wine at night just to ride the roller coaster that is their nervous system. What can breathwork do, and what is the process to do it?
A good solid habit, discipline, is going to we all understand this. This is, I mean, being an entrepreneur, you've got to have discipline in what you do.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, we all lose sight of this, including professional athletes, coaches. I mean, I've been an athlete. I'm a coach. I'm an entrepreneur. I do this stuff. I work with entrepreneurs. I mean, one of my highest level clients is Ari Emanuel, who runs Endeavor and WME, right? He has been affected by this, and his entire C-suite has thanked me as a result of the work that we've been able to do, right?
I bet they're like, good thing you did that ahead of time.
Well, yeah. And I mean, look, I actually just talked to him this morning, hence why his name just came up. But it's like, I'm like, how you doing? He goes, I'm breathing, man. I'm doing a lot of breathing. And, it's true, but he's had a practice for 5 years now, right?
Wow.
So it's a default mechanism on how to do that. So it's like, hey, what do I do in the morning? Do I have 5 minutes before I actually pour coffee, which is actually going to, I get it. I drink coffee from time to time as well. I do, but my breath practice comes first, and my breath practice always comes first because it's literally telling me where I'm at, right?
Right.
Because if I can't follow the pattern that I'm normally used to following, that gives me clarity on where I'm at, then I know I'm off.
Right.
So I know I'm stressed. And then if I train patterns, I then know when I'm in the stressful situation, a meeting, a presentation, an employee debacle, whatever's going on, I don't lose it by just shooting my mouth off and reacting. I can sit there and breathe in through my nose and out through my nose calmly and default into this pattern of, and I now respond and listen. And that's, I think, the most profound thing. And I mean, look, I teach tactical community this stuff. When firing weapons and being in high stress situations, bullets coming by. Hey, how do you handle yourself here? Is it freaking out, going, or is it, either way, you might get shot, but which one do you want to make the better decision? We know one makes a better decision than the other.
Yes.
So that goes for us as entrepreneurs.
Wow.
Like, you want to make better decisions. You want to be more creative. You want to have people happier. Learn to respond. And this is our means for controlling the physiological responses that occur.
Wow.
By and large. So our chemistry is regulated through breathing. So meaning the alkalinity of the system is largely dependent on how we breathe. And so if I overbreathe, I become too alkaline and things start to go haywire and I get high sympathetic, right? And if I underbreathe, I get acidic, right? And I have most of us will never really run into this problem, but you will see the elderly that tend to run into this problem, which is why they go on oxygen concentrators. This is a CO2 problem, right? But having a breath practice, just 5 or 10 minutes in the morning, 5 or 10 minutes in the evening can change almost everything very quickly on how you feel throughout the day. And so we do that by giving people a test, and it's called a CO2 tolerance test. And that is a max exhale test where they will sit there calmly or lie down supine, so on their back, and they'll just breathe calmly for 2 minutes. Nothing special, just all the way in, relax out, and just repeat that so you get relaxed. Then you, at the top of the 2 minutes or so, you take a full inhale and hit a timer. Don't watch the time, and you exhale as long as you possibly can through your nose.
Okay.
And you can repeat this several times in order to get better at, because there's a little bit of motor control. And motor control means autonomy to the nervous system, basically. The nervous system starts to pick up a little bit more wiring to musculature, especially around that diaphragm, and how to control things. And so you do it a few times and you get your score. And that score can be input into something on our website. It's free. It's totally free. And you can actually just go to our website or go to my links. It's called the breath calculator. Perfect. And so the breath calculator, you put your time into that. And there are 3 apnea, which refers to holding patterns. And then there are 4 cadence patterns that you can get. And so you can screw around with each one of these to see how you feel. One should make you feel a little more alert and calm. And one should kind of make you feel really calm or even super relaxed, or like you could go take a nap or even go to bed.
Okay.
One should be for the morning. One should be for the evening.
Love it. Oh my gosh.
That's how that would work, right? And so a minimum dose is 10 cycles of one breath pattern. And just playing around with those will allow people to do that. We also, I do consults, all this stuff all the time, but this is the free version of like going and getting into the weeds with this stuff and really learning how to control a breath pattern. The simplest and most fundamental thing any human being can do. And this is free and it'll change your life.
Yeah, love it.
Is no matter what you do for exercise and movement, shut your mouth for the next 4 months or the next 4 weeks. Okay. Mouth closed during all training, no matter what it is. If you need to breathe through your mouth, stop what you're doing, get a breath through your mouth and go right back to your nose, right? Do that for 4 weeks. Consider getting some mouth tape for at night when you sleep and taping your mouth.
Wow. Okay.
So that you're using your nose. And here's why. Your nose is your fingerprint to aerobic activity. You have a filter system that begins with your nostrils, okay? Then you have hair follicles. There are as many hair follicles throughout this nose that there are on your head.
Oh my gosh,
and they're there
really?
for you want to talk about things like COVID, right?
Yeah,
like
right.
Okay, look, those hairs also have a coating of mucus that is also lining the inside of the nose. That mucus picks up pathogens, particles, bacteria. That stuff goes to work with the immune system. This is the first line of defense to where T cells are immediately created and dealt with. Then that air goes into the sinuses where it is humidified, circulated, and then pulled into the lungs, where the diaphragm is actually working better. I don't have to actually use my diaphragm as much when I go. I can get away with murder breathing through my mouth. And the only filter I've got are those tonsils, right? Well, it just so happens those tonsils become secondary or tertiary when I breathe through my nose. So anything else that goes through can probably hit those tonsils, right? If I've got them. Yeah. So that nose closing, the biggest difference between if I breathe through my mouth right now and my nose, it's not how much oxygen I get. It's the limitation of the carbon dioxide.
Okay.
So the limitation of that CO2 coming out now governs how well I'm using the oxygen inside my body. And although that might feel a little stressful at first, a breath practice starts to build on that foundation. So when my 10 cycles of breathing get really easy, I then bump those up, or I redo my CO2 tolerance test and I get new numbers. And I start doing that. So it's just like training in anything. You make more money, you get more employees, you start building your business. Like it's the same idea, okay? Like if you just want to stop where you're at, you're not building anything, right? And it just becomes plateauish, right?
Right.
So this is how we build. So carbon dioxide is the metabolic stress messenger of the body. It triggers what stress is going on, whether that's physical or cognitive. Cognitive, I suppress my ability to tolerate it.
Right.
Physically, I increase CO2. So my metabolic response becomes, this is why when we work out, respiration rate goes up real quick. Well, if I actually limit my breathing, it limits how hard I can go and forces me to stay more aerobic and use more of the oxygen available, right? So this is why we lay the 4-week foundation.
Yeah.
This in turn, anybody who's engaged in this, I've got thousands of responses on this. Lives have changed across the board in the first week.
Wow.
I've done experiments on my social media where it's like, okay, this week you're going to plug your nose and you're just going to breathe through your mouth and let's see what happens. And 90% of the people are like, you're high. I'm not doing that. I already know what's going to happen. Then some people try. And for 2 or 3 days, they get through it before they're just stressed out. Their blood pressure's gone up.
Wow.
Their resting heart rate's increased. They feel gross. Like they're not sleeping well. And then it's like, okay, shut your mouth for a week and let's see what happens. Calmer, more better responsive. My immune system, my resting heart rate dropped, my blood pressure dropped. It across boards, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a call. It isn't. But it's the thing that's changing how we use energy. And this is how we can make big, big changes into how the body responds to all this stuff.
So powerful. And I'm sitting here thinking, so when my mom told me to shut my mouth, she was actually really giving me a blessing.
Correct. and sit up in your chair and take a deep breath and like all of these, folk tales and old wives' tales that occurred over our lives. Yes, these were all true. They may not have known exactly why, but yep.
I would love, Brian, for you to share any story that comes to mind of somebody like ourselves, like entrepreneurs who are up to big things in the world, that started working with you, started really diving into this, where they kind of started, and what doing this breath work on a consistent basis as part of their daily morning, evening routine created for them. I don't know if you have like one that sticks out for you, or just, a story that.
I mean, Ari's the easiest, biggest case, because most people know who he is.
Yeah.
And I mean, and if you don't know who he is, he's the co-CEO, one of the founders of Endeavor, WME, William Morris Endeavor. And he came to me for the breath work 5 years ago because he just struggled with meditation. He's a very, very on human being. Like, if you've got a 15-minute meeting with him, he'll make it 5, and he's going to probably talk most of the time and then end it. And I mean, it's very click, 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 click. And I got to work with him, and we did a version. We did something called a step-up protocol with him, where we would do 20 fast, deep breaths with the nose, and then we would do some slow, controlled breathing and a breath hold. It would be in it. And this instantly perked his attention. It got him feeling well. And then we did a few rounds of this, and it changed how he thought about anything and breath work. And so he continued to follow this path and stay in touch with me. And so we developed that. And then we started to develop things around his training and keeping his mouth shut. He started doing a lot of he got into some of the cold training, the sauna training, and we would wrap breath work around those things as well. And so when we started to introduce the fact that breathing became a part of training, then that defaulted into, I'm in a meeting and I'm acting like, I'm getting crazy. So I'm actually, he started to become aware of this, and he would tell me, he's like, dude, this is changing me, how I'm doing things. And then, talking to other executives, they're like, you have no idea how much has changed. It's crazy.
Wow.
Like, he's just more compassionate. He has more empathy. And it's not there are notorious stories about him. I've never actually encountered that with him, and it's probably because of the work that I've done with him.
Right.
But he's included me in a lot of things in front of company wide that have been, I've been at massive gatherings and things that we've done, and this has become a part of his daily, of how he functions throughout the day.
Wow.
And so when people ask, like, oh, Brian, well, what's your breath practice like? And I'm like, almost overwhelming if I give you the answer to that, because there is not a part of my day where I'm not actually thinking about engaging in a breath practice anymore. Other than when I'm talking to somebody, which I do become aware of what's going on. When I stop talking, I instantly will default into, I control my breathing. And because I feel the ramp up. I mean, you'll catch on to this, is when you start to talk to people or present to people, you'll start to feel your on, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, it's not my turn to be on. I should come down so that I'm actually responsive to what's going on. I'm taking in, and I'm not just somebody who's looking to answer or looking to put my input into something, right? And most entrepreneurs are pretty good at this stuff, but this is just another tool in the shed that ends up becoming a part of your daily life, and you don't even realize it does. And that's where it becomes everything. And that's where it's signaling to me, it's responding before I actually understand what's going on, because we're an electrical thing, a storm of information, and that response to breathe is happening. And when my breathing gets off, I instantly know what's going on. I'm like, oh, we've got a response going here. If I need to open my mouth right now when I'm training, and I don't want to be moving that kind of energy today, I know I've got to back off. Right? Okay. So that's telling me, in an intense situation, if I'm not wanting to be that intense that day, and yet I'm looking at the work I'm doing, and it's like, oh, I could have done this. Like yesterday I was doing this, no problem. That means I'm more stressed. This is where that breath practice comes in, where we connect the CO2 tolerance to the breath patterns that we're using, and how they usually feel easy or moderately easy, and now they're very difficult, or I can't even do them. And that's, my stress levels are up, and I need to do something, or I need to manage myself better today and not do as much.
Wow. This is so powerful because I'm sitting here thinking like how you see it, right? I love the way you said it. You sense it in people. Like I can watch people online and I can just feel the energy. I know where it's coming from. I've been there. I lived there at one point in my life, and I've been on a journey to really shift that. And it's crazy that when we start to rely on these systems that are hardwired, that we have control over them. We feel, and especially right now, we feel like can't control the government, can't control the virus, can't control the economy, right? But my work, you can control your thinking, and you can control this automatic system to actually perform in a way that it's optimally giving you a stress relief that you don't have to medicate for, you don't have to overcompensate for, and you can actually just be in the flow of it. And that's the difference. It puts me in a place of generosity, gratitude, presence, flow, versus trying to be heard, trying to be seen, trying to be, right?
Think of how high level you guys perform at, right? Like think of what you do business wise and how you perform really well. Yeah. Then take somebody who doesn't, right? Put them in your situation, and what would they do? Hey, I need you to handle all this stuff today, yet you're only used to doing or filing these things. Yeah. What happens to them? Yeah. They get stressed the hell out and freak out and don't know how to handle things, right? Well, I started connecting that with people so I work with Laird Hamilton was a good friend of mine. He's big wave surfer, arguably the most influential guy in surfing history. We would go out into 60, 70 foot plus surf, and we would do breath work prior to going out. We would head out into this surf, and I would watch Laird get on a wave, and his arms would come out, and he would just settle in, and his mouth was shut. And he would just be in this place where he was completely in the most creative space that I've really witnessed somebody at that extreme of a level, right? Yet there's extreme athletes doing crazy things. And the difference is that if I were to hop on that wave, I would be going, holy crap, I'm going to die. I'm not going to make this. This is insane. What am I doing here? Oh my God. Like, right? But yet I ride waves, and it's the size and the thinking of, oh my gosh, I don't have the skill set to do this right now. So I'm blah, 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 versus, all right, we're going to make a jump into something that's going to stress us out a little bit. Let's start paying attention to this and use this tool to calm down when we can be aware of it, and allow ourselves to absorb the stimulus and the things that we're taking in. We need to take breaks. Go for a walk more. Go for a walk for 10 minutes several times a day, and shut your mouth when you walk. Don't get on your phone. Don't start doing calls. Shut your mouth. Go for a 5 or 10 minute walk. Come back. That's breath practice right there. You shut your mouth on purpose. That is a breath practice. You just controlled your breathing. Right? This is something that can start to change things. Having a standard breath practice in place in the morning and the evening, that'll change things throughout the day. You'll start to feel the changes that happen in your day when stress starts to go high, and go, what can I do right now? And instead of reaching for outside in, you now are going inside out. That is why we are exposed right now. In the current situation. We are seeing how little control we actually have, and how many illusions we had bought into that literally are now presenting themselves, and it's like scramble, got to change the business model, and I'm doing this too. But it's like, what's the reality is, what do I have control over, and what can I do about it? And in between stimulus and response is a place called choice. Viktor Frankl. And that is one of the things we teach. And one of the stories we tell is about the lion and the antelope. And every day in Africa, the lion and the antelope coexist together. They are not in a hunting pattern all the time. They're perfectly fine coexisting meters away from each other until the lion makes a decision it's time to hunt. And it's time to eat. And then boom, the lion's behavior changes, and the antelope picks up on the energy and perks up. And all of a sudden the lion takes off, and now we're in a heightened chase. And now the lion is chasing the antelope. And if we were to strip away the picture and put up a dashboard of physiological response, heart rate, pupil size, sweat, or they don't sweat. So, all of the things that are going on physiologically in the system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like chemical reactions, acetylcholine, dopamine, adrenaline, all of these things. Each animal has their own dashboard, and that's all we get to see. We would not be able to tell the difference between either animal.
Wow.
The difference here, though, is that the lion wants to be there and the antelope does not. And this is a life and death situation. Most of us are never really in these types of situations. But what we have the ability to do as human beings is make a decision whether we want to be the lion or we want to be the antelope. Meaning, I'm not talking about going out and hunting things, but choosing to be in a shitty situation and make better decisions. At the heart and the foundation of all training, whether we're talking about mind training, physical training, whatever training, entrepreneur training, it is the ability to make a better decision. That is it. That is fundamental across the boards. And breathing allows me to enter into that place where choice is and create a gap to make better decisions, to make several different decisions, to filter through these decisions, right? And that in and of itself allows us to see, and when we start to connect that dot, breath practice becomes a part of our day all day.
Brian, such gold. I will be linking up in the podcast notes to everything that you talked about. I want to encourage my listeners to just take Brian's challenge of starting with that CO2 test and get on that practice, because that is, we talk about it in my tribe and my insiders all the time. Getting through that space between situation and thought is where the decisions are made, and choosing that thought wisely is a decision. And so I know breath work has been game changer for me. It's been a game changer for me in my relationships, pausing as a parent, responding versus reacting. That has all been a shift for me. So it affects so many areas of your life. And Brian, really, thank you for your generosity and giving what you know here on the podcast. And how can people find you out there on the interwebs?
My website is brianmackenzie.com. That's for my bio, like mentorship stuff is at. But our business is powerspeedendurance.com. We have a lot of this. This is where the CO2 tolerance test is, where all the breathing resources are at. That stuff's free. Go ahead and play around with that. The training stuff under the hood is like, it's a simple $20 a month subscription for understanding the training and how to use breathing, breath control in that. And then my social media, I'm largely active on Instagram, which is @_Brian MacKenzie. And that's BrianMackenzie on Instagram.
Awesome. Yeah. We'll link all that up in the show notes. Brian, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and thank you for putting your genius out into the world and making it a better place.
Thank you, Shannon. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, you got it. All right. That's it for this week. Bye for now.